Scott Finder from the Hollywood Reporter. Thank you for being here tonight, and I'm very excited to be able to bring out the two people most responsible for this movie. I guess the three most representing the three most important roles when you consider that one of them has done two in this. So please join me in welcoming Mahershala Ali and the writer and director Cleary. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and congrats again.
Thank you.
So, Benjamin, I'd like to begin by asking you, we mentioned, referenced this a little earlier when I saw you outside, but where were you 6 years ago? What was going on in your life?
Well, I was editing my short film, my first short film. I was working in a chicken burger shop at the time, sleeping on friends' couches, generous friends, and trying to finish the short. And then the movie, it's called Stutterer, was my first short, and then just amazingly just won an Academy Award. It still sounds surreal to say, and then that sort of led me to, doors getting open, being able to write the script and
The concept for which had been around even before Stutterer, right?
Right, yeah, a long time. Yeah, I'd years ago, when I was 19, 20, 21, 3 summers in a row I lost friends, and sort of dealt with the sort of the grief that you see spread out when you lose someone suddenly and there's no goodbye, and seeing what that does to everyone left behind. And I think at that age, I just started to think constantly about, what would happen if someone I loved died, what would happen to my family if something happened to me. And when you're just obsessing over something like that daily, an idea like Swan Song comes along and you see in it that you're going to have to shine a light on some real personal stuff and some painful stuff, but that the premise grabbed me straight away, and I knew I was going to be able to hopefully bring some truth to it in a totally imagined set of circumstances.
Absolutely. Mahershala, 6 years ago, things were pretty different for you too. This gentleman didn't have his one Oscar, you didn't have two. And also, but the thing that's craziest to me is that this is the first time in a film we are seeing you as the lead of a film, which is mind-blowing to me. I feel like whenever I see you, you are the focal point of the film, no matter the size of the part. But I mean, I wonder for you, how you've been involved for a while with this project, and not just as the actor, as one of the producers as well. How does a first-time feature filmmaker, even one with an Oscar, get Mahershala Ali to sign on to a film?
Well, he's an amazing soul, and so he attracted some good energy. Ben wrote a fantastic script, and I was just so drawn in by, just by the premise and just how beautifully it was laid out. Ben, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but I remember when I first read it, I stopped when I got to the Echo Bar scene, because it wasn't at the beginning of the film. It was like page 30 or something like that.
Right.
It was,
yeah.
So, he played a little bit with it, in the process of kind of rejigging some things. But I remember when I got to that scene, I had to stop, and I went and I got my wife. I was like, yo, you gotta read this scene. This is incredible. And I just enjoyed reading that script all the way through, and it really touched me. And I don't really cry at the end of scripts too often. I can name a couple, and one of them.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But this was, I had that reaction after reading it. And I just called him, we connected, we sat down for a meeting, and we talked for like 2 hours, and I just felt so confident walking out of that meeting about who he was, his connection to the material, what his vision for the story was. And I just felt like, I think we mutually felt like we'd be really good collaborators. characters, and that is proven to be true, just experiential.
So this may be the film that you're referring to, that the other one where you were emotional at the end was a tiny little movie called Moonlight.
Yeah.
And your co-star in that was one Naomie Harris. And I wonder, when you guys were figuring out the rest of the collaborators for this one, talk about how you arrived at asking Naomie to be part of this, because I'm wondering, I'm not an actor, I'm wondering, would it make my life easier or harder to be in such emotional, intimate, sensitive scenes with somebody who I do have history with or don't? So I guess, I don't know if you suggested or how it came about, but I'd love to know.
Naomie was always perfect for the part, always. And it was the one concern I had for a moment was wanting to protect this film and make sure that the film could have its own space to exist and it not get convoluted with a whole other epic experience, right? But the more Ben and I just kept talking about Naomie, we were just convinced that she was just the right person. There was nobody else for that part, And I went back to just thinking about what she was able to do, and y'all need to be reminded of this. She did that in 3 days.
Moonlight,
what she did in Moonlight, she did it in 3 days in the middle of a press tour. She just stopped what she was doing James Bond press, and came in and just transformed into Paula, and then flew off into the sunset, and it was mind-blowing to work with her. I called my manager at like midnight after I wrapped, and I was like, I was drowning out there. I was trying to keep up with her. Like, she is a beast, like, she's incredible. And I just never forgot how committed and amazing and generous she was as an actor. And so, in thinking about her for this, I just, Ben and I both just felt like there wasn't anybody better. And so we did it, and also what I just want to add, last thing I'll say, is that to get to revisit working with someone, with Naomie, and in a completely different scenario, different iteration, and go from playing and I don't want to belittle this, because I love what Barry and Terrell were able to do and the characters that they crafted, like, oh my God. But to go from playing someone who was a drug addict, in part, that's not all of who she was, but like dealing with that, and then myself dealing drugs in that film, and then now to play people who were like healthy and whole as a Black family, like I wanted that opportunity with her,
So the other night, this movie premiered at AFI Fest, and Benjamin, you and Mahershala were introducing it and talking about the fact that, as is probably the case anytime there's this close of a relationship, and the actor is also a producer, that you guys had, both many wonderful moments, and then there were moments where it sounded like, you kind of bicker a little bit or whatever.
We never bickered. We never once bickered.
That's the right word.
But there's moments where you have to, and I'm sorry to cut you.
No, please.
There's moments where things get lost in translation sometime, and you got to check in.
Yeah.
And there's a couple moments where throughout the process, like where we've had to check in and just make sure we're on the same page, because it's like a marriage. Like, every day isn't like, hey love, give me love. Like some days you're like, hey, we gotta talk.
Well, no, and I figured, because I want to ask about just when you step outside of being great actor Mahershala, and you now have to also work with Benjamin on producing, just making this thing come to fruition. I wonder, for both of you, what were some of the biggest obstacles to getting this thing made? I mean, it's I think let's talk about that. Benjamin, if you want to start it off. Things have come a long way from the Parent Trap in either incarnation where you've got two people on. But like, how logistically do we end up with Mahershala opposite Mahershala? What does that entail for both of you?
I think it's like my biggest job in a way with making a movie that does have a a sci-fi element to it, and that being part of the premise, and the fact that we're going to shoot one actor for two, was to try and come up with a way where the technicals of it got out of the way as much as I possibly could so that you could do your work, right? And it still meant that we had a lot of technical challenges. But for instance, we never used like motion control because I knew that was cumbersome, and it was like you'd be waiting 20 minutes to do another take and things like that. So I tried to work out ways we could do it where, like, for instance, we'd stitch, with a pan rather than using motion control. Sometimes we'd use like a repeatable head, but most of the time what we tried to do was the old school stuff. We were doing split screens, we were doing over the shoulder things. Mahershala was working with Shane Dean as double and sort of speaking to Shane about like some of your intentions and guiding him through that, and then I'd sort of come into the conversation, we'd work like that. But really I wanted it to be more substance over style, and like to rarely try and do a really flashy shot, to try and have it so we believed from the first time we saw it that these were the two different characters, but to try and make it as untechnical as possible, and then to see what Mahershala did in the nuance between the two characters was just phenomenal, because really I think you have to find just the interior things that were different. And,
well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask, is like, does this, at the end of the day, did you feel exhausted? Is this like giving two performances in a movie, or take it into what it's like for you to do this?
Usually when I imagine we're in a room full of actors, right? So you are taking on somebody else's problems, right? Someone else's issues and all that. So this wasn't usually. So when you're working, you got two sets of issues, right? Your own and your characters that you're processing emotionally and you feel stress over. So there was just a third, And so I definitely needed some time off afterwards. It was such a gift to get to. I've always wanted to be tired. I've always wanted to be the right type of tired, if that makes sense. Like it's been my dream to be exhausted from a great week of work, and I was tired a lot because the job demanded so much of all of us, especially during COVID, and we're obviously still in it. But Scott, I forgot your question.
No, it's fine. I just about when you have that extra workload, you talked about it, and I guess, but you bring up COVID, and where were you guys in the process of this? Did COVID hit and interrupt you in the middle, or were you going into this from the beginning knowing that you were going to be dealing with COVID?
Yeah, we were 8 weeks out, I think it was. 8 weeks out, and we were up in Vancouver, and then we got the call that we were, getting shut down. And then we had like about I want to say it was 5 or 6 months till we got back up there, and obviously the world had completely changed. We got up and things were very different. But I will say, I think we just had a big gratitude to be able to just keep working. A lot of people couldn't, and I think that was something that helped to galvanize us all and helped to make it feel like a big family. And like going back to some of the performance things and the things you had to do and that tiredness, right? I think that it felt to me like there was a real community around us, and the things that you were having to do on a day-to-day basis, switching between two characters, and I mean, it felt like there was a support there that somehow we were trying to bind together because of what was happening, and everyone was worried about loved ones and what was happening outside the bubble of what we were doing. So it was like, it felt like it somehow is there.
I guess it would maybe help that it's not a huge cast. It's but among the principal cast here, you guys end up, we should not overlook, with also Glenn Close, Awkwafina, Adam Beach. Like, it's again maybe probably fewer than a dozen people, but each one of these are heavy hitters. And I guess anything you want to share about their contributions, either of you?
Everybody was just so generous. Generous with their time and their energy, and just just really committed to the story. Again, I think because of COVID, but this film was written and greenlit before any of this happened, you know, and so it was the parallels were just so strange, you know. There could be people in here who had friends or family pass away who you suddenly can't go and touch, you know, who are by themselves in a hospital, you know. And so there were scenes that there was just an energy in the air that felt very mindful of the moment. And I just think all of us felt really grateful to be working, because you can just take any of this for granted, you know, and just like, okay, when's my next audition coming, or when's the next, you know, and just assume, you know. And when there's sort of no chance of that, and the work stops and the calls stop, and then life becomes about different things, you know. And so I think that spirit was that mindfulness was on set, you know, and everybody from Glenn Close came on so gracious. Aquafina was so humble, like so humble. She kept saying, "Thank you for having me." We're just like, "What are you talking about?" Like, everybody felt like they loved and appreciated being there, and that was beautiful. You know, that was really beautiful.
I want to ask you where, so you said Vancouver was where it was mainly shot, but like, talk about these sets, because it does feel truly like something very futuristic, and then the production design of however you guys did the driverless cars and the stuff at your fingertips, and I you know, the lenses that are recording everything. These are cool concepts, but I mean, is that a kind of thing where Apple can be helpful with some of the like making this stuff look real?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, we were, you know, that was a lot of fun, you know, designing that stuff. It was a lot of work. Sometimes I was like, what am I doing for my first feature? I'm doing like, but it was, no, that was all cool. I think that the thing about it, really, we talked about it a lot all the way through. It's like, it's a really human story at the heart of this, right? But you do need to have a certain amount of world building so that us as an audience can watch it and you know, be immersed in that and feel like we believe it and believe that this technology can exist in that world, you know. So there was a certain amount of stuff we did, but we never wanted to tip over into it feeling like a world that was sort of unrecognizable to our world here, right? It was always one click on, you know. We all know what like an Uber or a Lyft is like, but this is self-driving. We know what being online is like, but this is with augmented reality. So it was really important in all of our choices that we made, and the wonderful Annie Bouchon was our production designer. She's amazing, and she really got on board with that, you know. And my team got sick of hearing me say like, no, too sci-fi, and I think it was because we just wanted to really pay homage to the human story at the heart of this. But the tech it's important. You got to show it when you're dealing with a premise like this, that, you know. Yeah.
And did you guys even amongst yourselves sort of establish, because I don't believe it's ever stated precisely when in the future this is, but did you have in your mind, you know, is this our world 50 years from now?
2040.
2040.
2040.
Okay.
We were all on the same page about that. And so if you think about, and that impacted so much, because if you even think about like clothing or fashion, like there's things that have cycled back around from 20 years earlier. Or if you think about what the world looked like in 2000, our biggest issue at that point was Y2K. You're like, are the computers going to shut down? And, you know, is our money going to disappear out the banks and all that kind of stuff, right? But the world looks and feels very similar, you know, the phones don't flip open anymore, but like, you know, and so if you've been spoken at length about everything just being one step ahead from where we are right now, or just a little bit more developed than how it is right now. So yeah, we were, and I must say, as an actor, what was great is the film turned out beautifully. The bot rolling by asking me, do I want to anything to eat,
Oh,
or
yeah.
my chocolate bar and whatnot, or the screen pops up, or there's the emoji that bounces up and turns into hearts. But as an actor, the only thing that I even really had to deal with that was a little bit annoying was the earpieces, the earbuds, because you can't hear, right? But everything else, nothing else, I didn't feel any of that. It felt like this moment now. I wasn't disrupted by any of it, so I wasn't transported into the future per se. That it was all very very easy to deal with, and so it didn't necessarily take me